Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I stand before you on behalf of the defense to plead my case one last time. For years, my client has faced accusations from legislators, corporate executives, media officials, but here, in this court of public opinion, it will all come to an end. Today is the day that truth stands on trial, and I'm here to defend it. Because recently, the second the truth is not convenient to us, that we accuse it of not being true. Now just look at the prosecution's witnesses. Anti-vax organizer Del Bigtree testified that vaccines were systematically microchipping Americans. Renowned flat earther Kyrie Irving testified that the planet was two-dimensional, just like his brain. Marjorie Taylor Greene testified that Jewish space lasers were to blame for California wildfires. And the NSDA testified that 100-degree Arizona heat would be appropriate for kids in suits. Horrifyingly, we can't recognize perjury when we hear it. And I fear the truth is only a few lies away from lethal injection. So, as public defender of the truth, now we must dismantle the prosecution's three claims against the truth. That truth is an enemy of power, that truth reveals our hypocrisies, and that truth makes us uncomfortable. The prosecution is arguing that truth is guilty because it's an enemy to those in power. Corporations, politicians, institutions all want you to convict the truth as a way to silence it, as a way to allow powerful people to hide their ugly realities in the darkness. But truth is not just an enemy of power, it's a victim of it. And so are we. George Orwell wrote in his dystopian novel, 1984, power is about tearing human minds to pieces and putting them back together again in new shapes of your own choosing. Ladies and gentlemen, people in power want to make a Frankenstein from our brains, and we are complacent. After losing the election 2 years ago, Donald Trump disseminated the big lie, convincing thousands the election was stolen. And according to Forbes magazine, it was this lie that allowed the former president to reel in over $250 million in donations. But while he fattened his wallet, the truth was stampeded on the Capitol steps. But it's not just our political leaders. In 1994, the tobacco company R.J. Reynolds falsified research, telling smokers that cigarettes were no more addictive than Twinkies. Yet in that same year, the CDC released reports that nearly 500,000 people like my grandfather, died of smoking-related illnesses, whether it's in the balance sheets or the voting records. Truth is cancerous to people in power. It shines light in the darkness. It unscrambles the Frankensteins of our minds. And it knows a Twinkie when it sees one. Because members of the jury, the ramifications of this war on truth hit close to home. My house is only 30 miles away from the East Palestine train derailment. And every day, the railroad company Norfolk Southern denies ignored safety protocol and minimizes environmental impact. Impact on communities like mine and yours. Thankfully, my client keeps reality on track, and in the process, saves us from being manipulated. But we have to let ourselves be saved. But our accusations against the truth don't end there. In America, we value our right to think freely, even if that means thinking hypocritically. And so when my client calls out these hypocrisies, we object. Prosecutorial witness and rap star Kanye West explained on a podcast that his philosophy is simple. I just tell the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't even think that needs a punchline, because whether it's creating anti-Semitic conspiracies or calling slavery a choice, Kanye praises the truth and yet denounces it at every corner. Look, I like some of the Kanye songs, but what the hell does he know about truth? As Americans, we want to believe what we want to believe, no matter how mutually exclusive. Conservatives champion free speech until that means having conversations about the war on drugs, pronouns, or Islamophobia. Limousine liberals campaign for eliminating economic disparities until that means sacrificing their $400 haircuts, underpaid housemaids, or private planes. Evangelicals love thy neighbor until their neighbor is someone like Ariana Mitchell, Letitia Green, Matthew Shepard, all of which are queer people who were murdered before they could see their 23rd birthday. We are trapped in an echo chamber of until, handing out exceptions only when it's convenient. After the tragic shooting in Uvalde, Texas, the state's governor, Greg Abbott, testified that the 21 deaths weren't indicative of a gun problem, but instead, a mental health problem. Ironically, NBC News records that not even a month before, the same governor slashed the state's mental health funding by $211 million. My client keeps us honest, even when we don't like the way it feels. Because as wise philosopher Lizzo once said, the truth hurts. And this leads us to the prosecution's third claim. The truth makes us feel uncomfortable. And we accuse the truth of making us feel guilty, angry, depressed, and these uncomfortable emotions are what Carnegie Mellon's Jason Matter articulates that lead us to choose blissful ignorance over facing reality. In Texas, textbooks call slavery unwilling immigration. In Tennessee, we slander drag queens as criminals. And in my home state of Ohio, we turn a blind eye to sexual assault allegations when it involves our city's beloved quarterback. You know, maybe Jack Nicholson is right. We can't handle the truth. But there will be a point in each of our lives when we can't choose blissful ignorance, no matter how hard we may try. For years, I hid my truth as a queer person out of fear. Fear of what my family would think, fear of the friendships that would die, the fear of the dangers associated with being out. But it is the truth. It's the truth that I might be ranked down for speaking about in this round. It's the truth that I worry every day will write my obituary. We all have uncomfortable truths. Because whether you're a child of divorce, a struggling parent, or someone who has had an abortion, and we all feel this pressure to conceal our truth when it isn't pretty to talk about. But that's not why we need to talk about it. Because the truth isn't pretty, but it is beautiful. As feminist Gloria Steinem coined and pregnant performer Rihanna reiterated, the truth will set you free, but first, it'll piss you off. Sure, the closet is comfortable, but it is not a home. I get it. The truth can be tiresome and unruly and nerve-wracking. But by denying it, we deny ourselves. The truth is not an enemy. It's our last chance. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I cannot offer you a brilliant Elle Woods revelation. There is no ammonium thioglycolate moment to be had. Though I am not blonde, I am legal. We cannot be so terrified of the truth that we call it a criminal. Because whether it confronts our power, exposes our hypocrisies, or bruises our emotions, as members of the jury, you have the duty to see the truth. As Atticus Finch reminds us in To Kill a Mockingbird, a courtroom is no better than its jury. And a jury is only as sound as the people who are sitting on it. Because in the face of relentless indictments, the truth continues to fight for us, not against us. I think it's time that we fight for it. And that's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Contestant number 2, code 4596, will enlighten us with the speech, "The Me in Media."
At the climax of Disney's 1999 film, 10 Things I Hate About You, the protagonist recites a poem by that same title that totally ate down. I liked the idea so much, I decided to write my own version, 10 Things You Think You Know About Me by Mafaz. You might believe that I'm a passive little girl, that I'm not allowed to sing and dance and twirl. Maybe Princess Jasmine isn't the best we've got. Is she really even Muslim? Hey, just a thought. You might think you've seen the best there is, which is truly bold, because a beautiful story about me is yet to be told. Okay, I know I'm lacking that Disney touch, but you get the idea? I don't see myself in Disney. Or even Disney Plus. Like, what's the point of the plus? Honestly, you know what? It's more like Disney minus. Disney minus me! But this isn't just a problem with Disney. It is one that can be found across all of our media platforms. The under- and misrepresentation of Muslims perpetuates ignorance, prejudice, and even violence. While 1 in 4 people globally identify themselves as Muslim, according to a 2021 USC Annenberg study of more than 9,000 speaking roles, they found that fewer than 2% were Muslim characters, and fewer than 25% of those were Muslim women. So I have to ask, where am I? Emmy-winning actor Riz Ahmed explains that people are looking for the message that they belong. And in that task, we have failed. So today, let's ask, where's the me in media? By first, looking at how Muslim people in general, and second, how Muslim women in particular are misrepresented. Third, the harms, and finally, some solutions. 10 things you think you know about me, part 2. That I'm a menace, a danger, that you simply can't trust this stranger. Or that because this all seems so new, I must be inherently different from you. The representation of Muslim people in general has been generally terrible. For the majority of America, the first time they hear about Muslims is through the media. And as explained by Professor of Communications Kimberly Powell at Penn State, the media coverage of Muslims focuses predominantly on oil, war, and terrorism. Comedian and social activist Hassan Minhaj explains that this representation feeds the fear that Muslims are going to take over the country, which he argues is totally wrong. Because they took it over a long time ago. You walk down the street and you're like, Habib, I'll have a kebab. And a few minutes later, you're like, oh, my back hurts. I need to see a doctor. So you call an Uber to get you to the hospital. Salam, I'm Muhammad, I'm outside. You walk into the hospital and are immediately greeted with, I'm Dr. Fatima. Nice to meet you. Hello, we are everywhere. But that's not what you see. As Chimamanda Adichie states in The Dangers of a Single Story, when you show people over and over again as only one thing, in the mind of the community, that is what they become. That is the nature of power. It is the ability not just to tell the story of another person, but to make it the definitive story of that person. And for so many Muslims today, it's a story that is built on the 10 things I hate about you mindset. Which brings me back to 10 things you think you know about me, part 3. You might see the hijab and think, oh, she needs to be free. And taking it off is the only way to liberty. You might believe I'm enslaved and need to be saved. Or that the way that I dress must mean that I'm oppressed. Now, I think I wrap my hijab pretty nicely. But I think it's wraps for the misrepresentation of Muslim women in media. We can start with Grey's Anatomy. It took 14 seasons for a Muslim woman to even get on the show. And hours later, she's taking her hijab off to stop someone from bleeding. Was the curtain not an option? Not even the blanket that the patient was wearing? They could have used anything. Tablecloth. The hijab removal is a common trope. Muslim women characters are constantly taking off their hijabs in our stories to adopt Western freedoms, to feel truly liberated, or to stop someone from bleeding. People, they are in a hospital. Does no one have a Band-Aid? It's a problem. You see, Muslim women in particular often take the hardest hit in these representations. As explained by Professor Diana Watt in the Journal of Media Literacy Education, Muslim women in media are depicted as dangerous, exotic, or victims of oppression. Because of the hijab, media crams a beautiful and diverse group into these narrow definitions of what it means to be a Muslim woman. So in the rare opportunities where we are represented in the media, we are portrayed as weak and submissive, as threatening and dangerous, or as some sort of sexualized fetish. It's like we are either mute or we are a menace. Now, imagine if the script was flipped. Imagine if the only perception I had of white girls came from one movie. Let's say, Mean Girls. You see, representation matters for everyone because it can feed so many of our prejudices and biases. And Muslims have felt the full impact of this terrible representation. According to 2017 Pew Research, 39% of Muslims have experienced harassment, intimidation, and even violence. And for those who are easily identifiably Muslim, the figure jumps to 64%. But behind each of these sanitized numbers, there is a messy story. In Baltimore this October, a 9th grade student was adjusting her hijab in a mirror when 3 girls attacked her, ripped off her hijab, and attempted to choke her with it. What's even more difficult for me to understand is the surveillance footage showing how a staff member who witnessed the onset of the attack and then locked the bathroom door from the outside as the 9th grader screamed. Why haven't we heard their screams? Why do we watch and consume media that misrepresents and dehumanizes these women as they fight for their lives? These women are not just percentages. They are not just numbers. They are stories. Like Zahara Lari, the first Muslim figure ice skater to compete and win internationally, whose favorite movie is Disney's Ice Princess. Or my mama, who has worked extremely hard to make her children's life better than hers, but also cooks some mean falafel and loves to borrow my Crocs. Because once we see beyond the representation that serves as a wall, we will find that we're not that different at all. So, let's rizz up some solutions. Now, in case you're not up to date on slang, Rizz refers to someone's ability to attract a love interest. But I'm gonna co-opt the phrase for the Rizz test by Ahmed Rizz. It's an easy tool to use the next time you sit to watch a show. According to the Rizz test, you need to ask first, is there an identifiable Muslim character? If the answer is yes, then ask whether the character is a terrorist, irrationally angry, anti-modern, a threat to Western values, or a misogynist. Or in the case of a female character, oppressed by other male characters. If the answer is yes, the show has not passed the test. So, advance to step 2. Do your homework. Expand your consumptions of shows that do pass the Rizz test in order to gain richer narratives. A great starting point is the website alkamia.com, which offers recommendations for shows, movies, and documentaries that celebrate the rich heritage of Muslim culture. Or you can check out the Netflix show Homecoming King, featuring the touching, sometimes frustrated, but always funny stand-up routine of former NSDA competitor Hassan Minhaj, who encourages us to act upon our better selves and to accept that love is intrinsically bigger than fear. Finally, hold each other accountable. We can't hold people responsible for their views when they have very limited media exposure of what it means to be Muslim. But we can hold each other accountable to learning more about one another. As the saying goes, we can't shake hands with a closed fist. There is so much more to me than what you see on TV. So much more to both you and me. It is something that we can all do. It's the 10 things that I can elevate about you.
Providing the illumination for speech number 3 is contestant 4772 with Let's Talk About Sex, Baby.
Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things that may be. Let's talk about sex. I hope you're ready for the most awkward and uncomfortable conversation of your entire life. Because today, I, an 18-year-old girl with absolutely no qualifications, will be talking to you about good old sex. Why? Because it's hard out here for a pimp. For my senior year gym class, I decided to take aerobics. And what I thought would be my coming of age high school fantasy turned out to be me doing the downward dog and awkward poses at 8 a.m. But what was more uncomfortable than these sweat stains in awkward places were these sweat-stained boys who behaved as if they had never seen a woman in their entire life. And when I had to explain to one of them that I did not pee out of my vagina, and he was completely shocked, I realized that there was a huge gap of sexual knowledge for teenagers. Advocatesforyouth.org describes sexual education as the provision of information regarding sex, sexuality, bodily development, and relationships. It's also skill building to help young people like me have conversations about and make informed decisions regarding sex. Each year, rates for teen pregnancies and teen sexually transmitted infections increase dramatically in the United States. This is directly correlated to the lack of proper sexual conversations directed at youth. Now, this may not seem like the most apparent or urgent issue, but as long as less than 6% of LGBT teenagers feel visible in sexual conversations, and as long as 1 in 5 women are sexually assaulted before they reach the age of 18, and sexual assault for men isn't even taken seriously, this is one of the most pressing issues. So, today, let's have a sneaky link while we talk about the reasons behind this huge lack of sexual knowledge for teens. Then, we'll set the mood. Turn off those lights, turn up the tunes, while we talk about the effects a lack of proper sex ed can have on students, before finally waking up the next morning, pretending like this never happened, and discussing some solutions to our sex ed crisis. One of the main reasons teens don't know enough about sex starts at home. The core of the problem is that parents find sexual conversations the hardest conversations to have, says Diane Morrison, a professor of social work from the University of Washington. And if people feel uncomfortable talking about straight sex, it's even harder for them to talk about queer sex. The Sex Ed for Social Change yearly state profile says that for heterosexual teens, 30 states, including DC, have policies that teach proper sex ed. But for queer teens, only 7 states have policies that teach LGBTQ sexual education. And Arizona isn't even one of them. As a queer teen myself, facts like these are horrifying. The Center for American Progress says that sexual education materials often assume that students are heterosexual and non-transgender. Many sex education curricula don't discuss gender identity or sexuality at all. And the very few that do only discuss it in a negative light. These are vital conversations that we cannot afford to miss out on. There are many effects a lack of proper sex ed can have on teens. The overall greatest effect is the lack of teens developing healthy sexual behaviors and boundaries, which can lead to things like teen pregnancy. The National Conference of Legislatures.org says that teen moms are more likely than their peers to drop out of high school, live in poverty, depend on public assistance, and be in poor health. Teens like my mom, who became pregnant with my eldest brother at the age of 18, causing her to miss out on so many life experiences, like going to college, seeing the world, and finding her dream career. Now, even though being a pregnant teen doesn't make these things impossible, it does make the possible much more limited. My mom always made sure I knew enough about sex, and she told me that if her mom taught her just a little bit more of this basic information, then her life now would look completely different. And if we don't learn about sex from trusted adults, we learn from somewhere else. Which leads me to my second troubling effect: teens learning about sex through pornography. The American College of Pediatrics did a study last year on boys aged 13 through 18 who were exposed to explicit content. They demonstrated their views on sex with things like showing callousness towards women, an increase in violence against sexual partners, and even considering the crime of sexual assault less serious. Sexual assault isn't always what they show on movies or TV. It's not always a scary guy in a dark alley. Sometimes it's stories like mine, being inappropriately touched in your gym class, and not even knowing that what happened to you was wrong. Not knowing because no one ever told you. No one ever told you or him about consent. And no one ever told you that sexual assault is sexual assault no matter what. Advocatesforyouth.org says that good sexual education teaches students what sexual assault actually is. It tells them what to do after being sexually assaulted. And most importantly, it teaches that sexual assault is wrong. What are teens like me supposed to do without this vital information? So, yes, the effects a lack of proper sex ed has on teens is very rough. But there are some solutions. A simple and easy one that can be completed through a 30-minute conversation. Parents, talk to your kids about sex. Now, I know the conversation may be a bit awkward at first, but the MayoClinic.org suggests some ways you can make having sex conversations a little easier. Number 1, seize the moment. When a television show or movie brings up questions about responsible sexual behavior, use it as a springboard for discussion. Number 2, be honest. If you're uncomfortable, say so. But explain that this is an important conversation to have. And finally, number 3, be respectful. And listen. Listen to your teens' questions and concerns about sex. And these tips aren't only useful for heterosexual teens. If you're the parent of a queer teen who doesn't really know where to start, well, PowerToDecide.org published an article December 23rd, 2021 that has you covered. It says, first and foremost, do your research. Don't rely on your child as your own personal gay Google. There are plenty of websites and resources online to help you learn more about the queer community and inform your conversation. And even though I've never gotten busy in a Burger King bathroom, because I do speech. I get 0 play. but it's still important that I have this information. Because sex talks don't have to be scary or serious conversations. But it is serious that we have these conversations to begin with. There are way too many teens like that boy from aerobics. Too many teens missing out on vital information that can change our futures, our lives, our bodies, the way we view our bodies. It can change us. There are plenty of effects a lack of proper sex ed can have on teens, but there are also some simple solutions. So now, it's up to you. It's up to you to have these important and vital discussions. And I'm not sexually active yet, but it's still important that I get this information for the day that I am. So, let's talk about sex, baby! More often.
Contestant number 4, code 4597, steps into the spotlight with the oration, Same Space, Different Universe.
Somali storytellers typically start with the phrase, Sheko, Sheko, Sheka Harira. Or, a story, it's time for a story. You know, unless you're my mom, she usually begins with, can y'all stop talking long enough for me to tell you the story? One of the stories she would tell was about Igal Shidad, a simple man who lost track of reality. Story goes that on one of his many journeys, he mistakes a rock for a lion and then runs off screaming, like Ron DeSantis from a drag show. Egal and DeSantis both create realities inconsistent with the real world. It's a great lesson in the way that we sometimes distort reality. And it's a lesson that's growing increasingly more important. As MIT professor Sinan Aral writes in his 2020 book, The Hype Machine, we are on the precipice of the end of reality, where large groups of people purposefully ignore or create reality. Reality being the presence of shared and objective facts, scientific knowledge, or data. Aral explains that while we've had this problem for centuries, the speed and scale with which misinformation spreads today is unprecedented, allowing us, as University of Maryland psychology professor Eric Ruglinski asserts, to avoid facing hard truths about our world, our families, even ourselves. Now, to make this a little more manageable, let's focus our attention on 2 habits we have in distorting reality. First, our tendency to ignore reality. Second, our tendency to create a completely different reality. Then, look at the harms, before finally, some solutions. In another Igal tale, he completely ignores reality when he hears news of a neighboring village about to attack. Despite a warning from his wife, Igal took a nap. Now, my dad thinks this is a story about oversleeping. My mom thinks it's about stupid husbands. I just think it's about ignoring reality. And stupid husbands. The truth is, we do this too. We perpetually ignore reality. The tensions between our perceptions and the actual realities of the world is known as cognitive dissonance. And in many cases, the human brain will look for ways to resolve that dissonance. Too often, ignoring it becomes the easiest way. A survey conducted by the Automotive Services Association found that in 2021, 33% of car owners ignored the change oil light in their car for over 30 days before taking it in. People, you're not fast and furious. You're just stuck and stupid. The problem is that the engine light is on in so many areas of our lives, but we ignore it. Brendan Nyhan, a researcher from the University of Michigan, named this phenomenon backfire, or the rejection of reality as a defense mechanism to avoid cognitive dissonance. That's quite the plot twist in our folktale, right? I mean, the best way to combat misinformation should be with facts and evidence of reality. But it actually does the opposite. And although we see the backfire effect for hot-button political issues like gun violence and climate change, it is just as likely with personal struggles, like ignoring the realities of our pain, our grief, and our addictions. Because while you can ignore reality like Egal, you simply cannot ignore the consequences. While the story of Egal and his wife was about creating reality, Egal and the lion was definitely about creating reality. As children, we do this by playing make-believe. But today, our make-believe has gone mainstream. In fact, when it comes to social media, according to Dr. Bruce Wilson in his 2023 article, The Curate Itself, we craft our online spaces to showcase the fun, the successful, and the woke sides of ourselves. But can I be honest? We need to try a little harder. That selfie you captioned, effortless. Yeah, I know you took 57 photos before you found effortless. It isn't just that we create false realities of who we are. We constantly consume false realities of who others are, leaving us to feel perpetually inadequate. It's like we want to wish our desires into existence, to fabricate a new reality when we don't like the old one. Radio show host Alex Jones gives us an example of how easy and how harmful it is to distort reality. He claims that the heartbreaking Sandy Hook shooting was faked by the government to generate support for gun control laws. Gaining traction for his conspiracy, people started harassing the families of victims by sending death and rape threats, and even going as far as claiming they would dig up coffins. And unfortunately, this isn't fringe. According to an October 2022 Insider article, it's now 1 in 5 people who believe in that conspiracy. How do you combat that? Because we might be seeing the same things, standing in the same space, but we are living in completely different universes. And last summer, my mom experienced what it's like to be living in a different universe. My mom and 2 of my little sisters decided that they'd surprise me in Louisville at last year's national tournament. And to make that happen, they had to drive through the night. At 2:30 in the morning, on a lonely stretch of interstate in Indiana, my mom was stopped without cause by an officer. For the next 30 minutes, he held her for an interrogation, accusing her of transporting drugs, hiding weapons, and even threatened to do an illegal search of her car. What was his reality? Did he see the hijab and dark skin and think, oh, she's a threat? Because in reality, she was just my mom coming to see her daughter. We have stretched, twisted, and distorted reality on so many critical issues. And every time it comes at a human cost. You see, when we manufacture a reality of voter fraud and then implement voting restrictions as a result, we disproportionately exclude Black, Latinx, and low-income communities of their constitutional right to vote. When we create a reality where immigrants are seen as dangerous, it becomes so much easier to lock them in cages, separate children from their families, or ban them because of their religion. This is our reality. And we can choose to ignore it or create a new one on top of it, but we run the risk of becoming menaces. Hegal saw a lion where there was just a rock. The officer saw a threat when it was just my mom. What will you see? It's easy to be overwhelmed by all of this. And I know I can't completely solve our reality problem, but I believe there are 3 specific cognitive choices we can make for a reality check. Check 1. Reality is here and not on your phone. Neuroscientist and author Aditi Subramanian reminds us that most of what we see on social media is performative. These are not slice of life, be real moments. When we treat them as such, we develop distorted views of reality and ourselves. It isn't that we have to eliminate our social media accounts, but rather, as Dr. Subramanian suggests, recategorize them as entertainment. Good plot, fun characters, but not really true to life. Check 2, check the engine light. So much of our distorted reality is about ignoring pain. It isn't that we have to be consumed by all the suffering around us, but acknowledging that pain. Whether that's the sadness, anxiety, and grief you might be carrying, or the collective despair of a community. And check 3, you've got to show up. In his article, The Year 2020 Shattered America's Shared Reality, journalist Derek Thompson writes, "Community is where you keep showing up, even when it is difficult to do so." We can't fight misinformation with data and facts until we build relationships and trust. Which brings me back to my mom. You see, the Somali word for mother is hoya, but it means so much more than that. It means the person who keeps you grounded. It's time we all looked for our own hoya to ground us in reality so that we can share the same space and live in the same universe.
Here to brighten center stage is contestant number 5, code 4744, with the selection, The Tragic School Bus.
The highlight of 3rd grade was being taught by the one and only Miss Frizzle from the Magic School Bus. From her bright curly orange hair to her vibrant dress matching the lesson of the day, she made learning absolutely magical. Her lessons, out of this world. Homegirl redirected an asteroid from destroying Earth. Beat that, NASA. The Frizz, as I like to call her, transformed learning from the traditional four walls of classrooms, allowing for real experiential learning. However, when assessed under Washington, D.C.'s school district's teacher evaluation rubric, Miss Frizzle received a mere 2.2 out of 5 and deemed minimally effective. As the Washington Post explains, under these standards, Miss Frizzle would fizzle. Likewise, with our own real Miss Frizzles, we have undervalued, underappreciated, and degraded educators. And I'm worried that if we continue to vilify educators, America will continue to lose. Magical teachers. Whether it be South Dakota teachers made to compete against one another for basic school supplies, or Larry Arnn, education advisor to Tennessee Governor Bill Lee, claiming that teachers come from the dumbest parts of the dumbest colleges. Educators raise each generation of thinkers, nurturing and challenging each individual entrusted to them. But lately, they have been under attack on a scale like we've never seen, consistently humiliated. U.S. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona says it best: we have a teacher respect issue in this country. So today, let's hop on the tragic school bus. And first, explore why we demonize teachers. Then, understand its inevitable consequences. Before finally, learning to love and acknowledge the Miss Frizzles in our own lives. It's easy to paint teachers as the villain of the story because, well, they're the perfect scapegoat. Callie Gass, special education teacher of 11 years, proclaims, teachers are always a scapegoat, never the goat. Society is quick to pass blame to teachers. For instance, the shift of tying teacher pay with student scores began under the Bush administration's 2001 No Child Left Behind policy. It focused on boosting scores instead of dealing with underlying issues like poverty, lack of funding and resources. The attempt to reform education only pointed the fingers at teachers, and the means of scapegoating them has only become more mainstream. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin offers a tip line to report teachers caught spreading controversial topics. And Republican group Moms for Liberty offers a $500 bounty on teachers teaching critical race theory. These ideas of throwing teachers under the school bus isn't new. The means of doing so has only expanded. It's also easy to exploit teachers because teaching is a helping profession. Clinical psychologist Holly O'Keefe explains that we expect teachers to be passionate enough to put up with poor pay, poor treatment, and a host of responsibilities outside of their job description. And speech and debate is no exception. KM Deco, founder of the Brooklyn Debate League, a nonprofit speech and debate camp, paid registration fees, washed suits, and stayed late for students who didn't feel safe going home, all while teaching a full class load and coaching after school. When a former student asked, How could you afford to do this as a public school teacher? Deco responded, I couldn't, but I saw you all as an investment. Teachers have become the providers in the welfare system we call public education. And this has long-lasting consequences on educators' health. The overburdening of school systems has pushed teachers to physical and mental exhaustion. The 2022 National Education Association study reveals that the most serious issue educators are experiencing is burnout, which has only been exacerbated by the pandemic. Even the most loving and well-intentioned teachers fizzle. Linda White, teacher of 21 years, explains that teachers were not equipped to handle the social, emotional trauma that students had experienced. Due to panic attacks and a mandated stress leave, she had no choice but to retire. In fact, the US is seeing a mass exodus of teachers. My home state of Florida began this school year with 9,000 teacher vacancies. School systems were already crumbling, with educators hanging on by a thread. But now, teachers have no choice but to let go. And those who have decided to hang on are left helpless. Time and time again, during emergencies, teachers have been the only line of defense. In the 2012 Sandy Hook school shooting, first grade teacher Victoria Soto placed herself in the line of fire to shield her students. In the 2018 Stoneman Douglas school shooting, school resource officer Scott Peterson hid as history teacher Scott Beagle and coach Aaron Feist sacrificed their lives to provide coverage for students. And in the 2022 Uvalde school shooting, 376 officers waited 77 minutes before approaching the attacker. While fourth grade teachers, Irma Garcia and Ava Mirles, were fatally shot as they shielded their babies from gunfire. We have neglected and left teachers defenseless. And when the good guys with the guns fail, teachers are left to protect and serve. All on their own. So, what do we do? Well, first, we have to start acknowledging teachers as the good guys. Veteran teacher Nancy Flanagan explains that teachers have just spent the past 2 years proving that they can adapt and excel under terrible conditions. Honor that. This can be as simple as writing an appreciation letter. In 2016, fourth grade me did this for my very own Miss Frizzle, Ms. Zadie. I emailed her over winter break, thanking her for making my first 4 months of fourth grade feel like one. Or rather, a one-way trip on the Magic School Bus. Unbeknownst to me, she posted that email on Facebook, saying that messages like mine made her excited to get back to work. 8 years later, she texted me, saying that email is one she still cherishes today. Because in a society that degrades teachers, a little bit of kindness, a little bit of humanity goes a long way. But let's be honest, saying thank you doesn't magically fix underfunded classrooms or increase teacher pay. My teachers have always made wonders out of nothing, but they shouldn't have to. Bronx public school teacher Charles Best founded Donors Choose, an online platform designed to fund classrooms. If you go to the website, you could put in your zip code and view teachers right in your community requesting classroom resources. And the website is completely transparent, showing you where every dollar goes. And if you really, really want to help, author and teacher Abby Kidd says, go vote. Thank a teacher by voting for candidates who support the discontinuation of this exploitation. Being of Nigerian heritage, education is a pillar of my culture. As my mom, a former high school teacher, always told me, education is a gateway to endless opportunities. But education isn't possible without our teachers. Miss Frizzle opened my mind and sparked my imagination. But she had nothing on my three-dimensional teachers. Like Miss Christina, whose gift of a book is a principal reason I am the orator I am today. Or Dr. Sood, who inspired me and made it possible for me to pursue my dream of medicine. O Profe Silva, que me dio la confianza para aprender y hablar en español. Or my coach, who is the reason I am standing on this stage and sharing this message with you all today. To every teacher who has impacted my life for the better, thank you. Thank you for making my life so much more magical. It's time we start treating teachers as the caring professionals they are. So, in the words of the Frizz, take chances, make mistakes, and get messy. Class dismissed.
Our final spotlight on stage this evening is filled by contestant 4759 performing Disrespectful.
According to the official NSDA textbook, though the rules for the event may be different in specific states and districts, generally, an original oratory is written and memorized by the performer, is no longer than 10 minutes and 30 seconds in length, and addresses a societal problem. Throughout this text, you will explore how to perform a speech so that it reflects you. I was a freshman when I read that. My speech and debate career really began to take off. My then coach must have recognized something in me. I don't know, the potential to be someone in this event. And maybe he said it because he cared for me, an attempt at making sure my full capacity was realized. Or maybe he was a narcissist who wanted to do well in a strong investment. I'm not sure. All I know is that when he sat me down, looked me in my eyes, motioned to my dreadlocked hair and said, you know, if you want to make it, you're going to have to cut those. I was left at that speech tournament, ironically, speechless. But that's to be expected, right? That's speech and debate. That's original oratory. Suits gotta be tailored. If you wanna make it, hair's gotta be appropriate. If you wanna make it, you've got to be respectable if you want to make it. And that's the problem. Respectability is a prize that is dangled for the eyes of marginalized people to convince them to sever the connections they have to their communities in favor of a liberation that will never be found. And the role that speech and debate, and specifically original oratory, play in that mission is by enforcing arbitrary rules that work to exclude the students that exist outside of civility. So this is not going to be a traditional oratory. I'm not dressed like a traditional orator, and I don't want to sound like a traditional orator. Because the NSDA only lays out 5 rules. This is the way original oratory must look. It must be memorized. It must not exceed 10 minutes and 30 seconds. It must not quote over 150 words. It must have an MLA-cited bibliography. It must be written in the current competition year. Aside from that, all of the other rules that have so often defined the way this event looks are made up. So I am going to perform in a way that reflects me. Less formal and more conversational, to do a 2-part analysis. First, on the way respectability looks in society, and second, the specific grip it has on speech and debate. So we can finally understand the importance of being disrespectful. So I read an article by Michaela Bacan and Alice Warwick titled Performing the Vanilla Self, in which they said respectability operates in 3 phases. First, it takes one big group and cleaves it into 2, assigning specific characteristics to both. The respectable me and the shameful other. I'm a good queer. I don't wear crop tops. I don't make it my entire personality. Girl, I don't even have pronouns. But you know that they, them over there, I mean, they do too much. It's shameful. Really. Second, respectability reinforces stereotypes that both groups suffer underneath because, surprise, they share the same identity. Evelyn Higginbotham, the Southern Black church lady who coined the term, used it to tell other Black women to perform as sexually pure and modest, to reject the stereotypes of Black female promiscuity. But y'all tell me why. In 2017, the Georgetown Center for Law and Poverty released a report where they found, starting as young as the age of 5 and continuing until 19, Black girls are more likely to be considered older than they actually are, more knowledgeable on adult topics like sex, and more likely to be punished because of it. So that begs the question, what was all the modesty for? And for the final phase of respectability, I like to think of her as a messy girl with a nasty spirit. And we're all in high school, so I'm sure you have someone in mind. Because what Respectability does is she comes around and she says, look, I'm sorry about phases 1 and phases 2, but you can still be respectable. You can still succeed if you can be like that. That is white, middle class, able-bodied, cis-hetero, and male. If you can achieve that, you've already made it. But I can never achieve that. You can never achieve that. You can never achieve that. You can never achieve that. So who can? As much as I hate to admit it, my old coach was right. You've got to be respectable to make it. We can cut the bullshit. This event is not as progressive as they would like you to think. You think what? Because Order spends so much time talking about our race, our gender, our bodies, our identity, that this event does right by us. Girl, please. You have to look a certain way, talk a certain way, walk a certain way, act a certain way, and if you can't do that, they won't even let you through the door. And you can forget about the damn stage. To give an original oratory, you must pick a topic you have a strong connection to, but they don't tell you so often is the strong connection trauma. You must address a societal problem, but you can't pick sides. You can't name the actors in your own oppression lest you offend the judge. And above all else, you can't get angry. Because when you are angry and Black, angry and female, angry and queer, angry and indigenous, angry and Asian, angry and an orator, it's simply not respectable. But I'm angry. I'm angry at an event that tells us to perform in a way that reflects us, but doesn't even know who the hell we are. Because if we did tell you, if we did lay it all out on the table, you would have to ask yourself, who do these stories really reflect? Not me. Not you. Who? This speech was my attempt at a solution. I mean, it's logical, right? If you're talking about respect, you get disrespectful. Duh. But it's harder than that. Because first, we have to divest away from the systems of power that enforce the rules that we suffer underneath. The Black Panther Party was able to do it in the 60s, when they started the free breakfast program for inner city children. They didn't ask for money. They didn't ask for power. They didn't ask for respect. They stood in the fact that they were uncivil, and they built community around it. And for those of us who have made it into the room, we have to get a little bit disrespectful, just a little bit, y'all. Because if we don't, it doesn't make space for the students that are continuously locked out. Out of resources, out of opportunities, out of success. It starts with us. According to the official NSDA textbook, though the rules for the event may be different in specific states and districts, generally, an original oratory is written and memorized by the performer, is no longer than 10 minutes and 30 seconds in length, and addresses a societal problem. And throughout this text, we have learned how to perform in a way that reflects us. It's time to stop asking, oh, is this respectful? And instead, get disrespectful. Thank y'all.
At this time, please welcome the semifinalist in Joe and Pam Wyckoff Original Oratory, presented by the Red Hill Patrick Henry Memorial Foundation Auxiliary, to the stage. Congratulating this morning's semifinalist and finalist is Board President Pam Katie Wyckoff.